Welcome to the How to Buy or Sell a Business Successfully podcast. The concepts discussed in this podcast are for informational purposes only. No attorney-client relationship is intended or formed by this podcast. No legal advice is intended in the substance of this podcast. Feel free to check out our website, www.goforemanlaw.com. Enjoy the show and welcome your hosts, Jake Wayman and Sam Foreman. Welcome to How to Buy and Sell a Business Successfully. Our goal with this podcast is to try to help folks have a better deal process. Today, we are grateful to be joined for a really important topic, medical or dental practice partner buy-ins. We're joined by Jennifer Allen, who is the head of the healthcare practice group at Adams Brown. And we're also joined by CJ Morawitz from Emprise Bank, banker extraordinaire and also former farm boy. Is that right?
Fair enough.
Tell our listeners a little bit about yourselves, if you would, and then we'll kind of dive into today's topic. Jennifer, why don't you go first?
Sure. Sam said, I'm Jennifer Allen, and I have been a CPA since 2007. So working with medical practices, buying, selling, working on compliance, as well as strategic kind of planning. And in the non-work life, just kind of running around chasing my daughter and following sports events. So
awesome. How about you, CJ?
So I've been a Wichita, I guess, native for the last close to 20 years. Grew up on a small farm in Oklahoma and made the move north. And I've been working in medical practice finance for roughly 8 years. So practice buy-ins, buyouts, real estate, new construction, equipment, everything in between. And outside of work, I guess, live right outside of Wichita in the country and enjoy all the things outdoors and chase 2 kids. So
that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome. I also chase my children, and sometimes they are just busy beating me up at home all the time. I have a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old. It is hands down the best part of my life is being a dad. It is also the most injury prone at present. So fun times. Okay, well, I want to talk a little bit about if you would, CJ, give us a real high level overview of what does the lending process look like for someone that's buying into a practice. What does the timeline look like? What should they expect from the process? Just kind of hit some of the high points, if you would, for folks.
Sure. I think starting out for most folks, you're looking at a valuation or if it's a small enough practice, sometimes they agree upon, outside of evaluation. If maybe the associate's been working there for a while or something and they've come to terms on what the plan is. But a lot of times you get evaluation. We look at all, personal financials, business financials, complete analysis of that. And as far as the timeline goes, it could be as quick as, a month if we have to. We can get an answer pretty quick, depending on the size of the deal and complexity. But as you know, sometimes they do drag out and we work on things for a couple of years. So it really depends on who's on their team and how quickly they want to get around to it. So.
No, that's helpful. What kind of down payments do folks need to, be prepared to bring when they're buying into a,
Sure.
medical or a dental practice?
Well, it depends. It's that great word, depends.
You get points. We should have a point tracker on the screen of how many times our guests use it depends in an appropriate manner.
Yeah. So with valuations, depending on who did it, they vary, but a lot of times we do up to 100% of the valuation. A quick dirty math, I guess you could say. You take the last couple of years of revenues, average that out. We'll generally loan up to 75% of that, but that word depends. It really depends on the financials of the buyer, the financials of the practice, and what they're really looking to get out of it.
So folks really before they've cemented, hey, here's what I'm going to pay. They might have a handshake on a number, but they really need to know, what that financing relationship is going to look like, how much extra cash they might need to bring to the table before they finalize that number.
Yeah, sometimes they don't need to bring anything unless there's real estate involved.
Yeah. And do you usually see that folks are buying into like an operating entity and a real estate entity at the same time when they're doing a practice buy-in?
Yeah, a lot of times that does happen. Sometimes doctors are wanting to keep the real estate as kind of an investment vehicle for a period of years, but a lot of times they just want to walk away. So we'll look at it either way.
Yeah. And does that change kind of that 30-day plus timeline?
Sure.
If there's real estate?
Sure. I mean, once you order the appraisal, it's kind of up to the third parties at that point. But generally, now that we made it past COVID, they're taking, 45 days or less sometimes to get back, so we can move on it pretty quick.
No, that's helpful. Jennifer, from your perspective, when you're working with folks that are looking at buying into a medical or a dental practice, for example, what kind of tax issues do you really encourage them to kind of be aware of as they're going into that process?
A lot of times we talk to them about an asset sale or a stock sale and understanding what the differences are, whether they're a buyer or a seller, and educating them to understand what the other side is going to be motivated to do and why, somebody might be motivated to allocate a purchase price one way or the other. Also what their liability is. But on the non-tax side of it, just thinking through with insurance credentialing. And so assuming it's a medical practice that is going to accept insurance, there can be a different timeline and acceptance of what that means if they have to go get their new EIN and get that credentialing done with the insurance companies, because that can really set kind of the timetable of how quickly, an entity could get up and running.
Sure. And when you're working with somebody who's going to come in as a minority owner, in a partner buy-in situation, they're coming into existing entities. What kind of tax traps or just kind of awareness do they really need to have when they're looking at what they should expect from, the taxes they're going to pay as a co-owner in that business?
Sure. So when they are buying into a business, the good understanding of which type of entity are they buying into? Are they buying into a partnership? Are they buying into an S corporation? Because there can be different tax implications on whether or not how the profits are split. Really understanding and having that agreement while everybody's in good terms with each other to understand how is income going to be split, how are distributions going to be allocated, and truly expenses shared, because it's easier to understand and have that all lined out before when everybody's happy with each other rather than when somebody's maybe gone cross-eyed with each other. We're
also joined today by Jacob Wayman with who is our co-host today. Thanks for joining us, Jake. No, I think that's great. Talking through folks about what to expect regardless of the type of structure, the type of tax structure for the entity. Because for a lot of people, if they're used to just being a W-2 employee, for example, that's going to be a big shift. Now they've got to deal with estimated taxes. They've got self-employed tax or self-employment tax that's going to affect them. And then you got to think about things like tax distributions, for example. How often do you have a client come to you and be like, hey, I've got to pay estimated taxes, but the company is refusing to, distribute, make a tax distribution or anything like that? Hopefully not very often.
Don't see that very much. But it's because we really preach and educate our clients on making sure that is set up in the original operating agreement, that there's a plan for distribution at a minimum to cover the taxes, and making sure that the attorneys have, like yourself, have added that in there. I think that's pretty standard language, but it is always good to make sure that everybody understands what that means, and it's not just up to the majority owner and that is actually listed out in the operating agreement. It also is good to understand that whether or not they receive any money, if they are an S corporation or a partnership, they are taxed on the money that is allocated to them based on their ownership percentage, not based on the amount of cash that they take out. So if they leave all of the money into the business, they are still subject to the tax because it's a flow-through tax. And so really understanding what that clear picture means is you can leave it in the business, which is fantastic for, having capital to grow your business, but then that means that you're looking elsewhere to pay the tax bill.
Yeah, no. And it's so important for folks to make sure that they've got good tax advice, when they are looking at making these substantial changes to their life, because they've got priorities, they've got plans. You want to put your kids in, good schools. You want to, you might want to buy a house or build a house. Or you've got all these other, priorities. If you're in a practice that's growing and so much of that money needs to go back into growing the practice, you may not have that cash flow at the same time that you have that tax bill that you've got to pay. And so making sure you go in with eyes wide open, and even beyond just, understanding what that tax bill is and knowing what your legal obligations to pay those taxes are going to be, just making sure that you're on the same page with majority owners, for example, about, hey, here's what we're doing with the business. Here's what our plan is. Here's how this stuff is going to work. So you don't get in there and then have a bunch of surprises when, all the money is going in a particular direction and you didn't understand that to begin with. So.
Absolutely. I think, really understanding what it means when they're buying equipment and taking depreciation, which just means how do we expense the cost of that equipment? Is it done in the first year? Is it done over a few years? Understanding that implications can be drastically different because a majority owner may have a different tax need and they may be wanting to make a decision that is completely different than what a minority owner would be, or if they're joint partners, how does that work? And so really understanding what it means to buy the equipment and how quickly you can expense it, reduce your taxes, but at maybe a different time period than how long you're paying for that equipment. So if you use equipment financing, you can pay for it over 5 years, but you maybe take the tax deduction over a different time period.
Yeah. So you as a minority owner might come in and be a co-owner in a business that has all this cash outflow for stuff where other owners have already received the tax benefit of that deduction. And you need to know that up front because some of that stuff is expensive.
It is. It is not cheap. Medical equipment has not gone down in pricing, and I don't think it will. So.
Unlikely. Yes. Oh, goodness. No, that's great. CJ, when it comes to kind of that relationship that, like someone who's buying into a practice has, and maybe the majority owner who's still there, or there's a group of majority owners that are still there, when it comes to the financing process, does the business ever need to provide a guarantee on that financing that's used to buy in? Do the other owners ever need to provide any kind of guarantees? Just talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure. So in a group practice situation, you would look to the practice to provide the corporate guarantee alongside the buyer, would also provide a personal guarantee, but generally, we don't look to the other owners to provide a personal guarantee. Normally, that is, for us, that's the way we like to structure it. Keep it as simple as possible. And then in some instances, there could possibly be, one of them, if it's just a 2-doc practice, say, one was buying 50% of that, then some instances you may need to add on that outgoing or soon outgoing doctor on there for maybe a 1 or 2 year burn off period of the guarantee. But most of the time, it's just the practice guarantee and the personal guarantee of the buyer.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Do you ever run into situations where the the practice or the other doctors aren't expecting that. And then it's kind of a surprise because nobody talked to them about it early enough in the process. And it's like, you want me to sign what? Like,
Yeah.
Do you ever run into that or?
It has happened one time. One time.
This one time, what happened was,
One time. But we all learned from that, I suppose. Okay. But yeah, it happened one time. But most of the time, you make the effort to make sure everyone involved is in the know. I mean, that's part of being a teammate, not just for the buyer, but also the other partners in the business. You got to show the ample amount of respect to everyone that's involved, and you want to make sure everyone's on the same page moving forward with any type of practice, any deal in general. But yeah,
right. No, that's great. That's great. Jennifer, where do you see folks kind of running into some of the biggest challenges as they're getting their deals done on a partner buy-in, whether that's, from the deal process side or deal points, whether it's tax specific or not? Where do you see folks having the biggest challenges in their deal process?
Most of the time it is the negotiation. They're looking at the total price and trying to balance that and balancing being respectful of the selling party, because the selling party, this is most likely, their legacy. This is what they've been working 30, 40 years for, and that can be a balancing act. And so trying to understand what that difference is. The other thing that sometimes catches people off guard is just the difference in philosophy of, running a medical practice in the dental world, where I treat a pain because, or, a toothache because it hurts, or they were more on the preventive care. And so just a little bit different philosophy and understanding of working with, if they haven't been an associate in the practice and they're joining and they want to have different mindsets, they have different ideas and culture with their staff and, the people that they work with. And so really just kind of understanding that it's more than just the numbers. It's more than just understanding, dentistry or medical practices, but it's understanding the culture of running the business as well as, kind of getting into what it means to treat their people.
No, that's really helpful. CJ, kind of same question for you. Where do you see folks kind of running into the biggest challenges during their deal process?
I would definitely say what Jennifer said, but on top of that, for me, I run into life insurance. It's always a thing that comes up. They're like, oh yeah, I've got it, ready to go. And then, you get real close to closing. It's like, hey, you got the life insurance assignment ready to go. I'm like, I'm still working on it. So that sometimes some people think that it's a pretty quick process, even if they have an existing policy. But to get that assigned over, depending on who that is with, can take some time. And if you don't have it set up going into it, it really can take some time. Mm-hmm. So I would say that's probably the biggest unknown that I deal with mostly.
Yeah. When you've got folks that are coming in and they're employees and they're going to remain employees of the business, do you see very often that that's a smooth transition? They're now going to be an owner, but they're also going to be, continue to be an employee. But maybe their compensation in some way is still subject to, majority owners, for example. Is that something that you see folks have very many issues with, or, just one of those other things to be really mindful of how it's going to work? Sure.
I don't hear of much of that. A lot of times, the associate will join the practice, and kind of be aware of, they'll meet the longtime employees, they'll meet the short time. I mean, they'll meet all the employees to make sure it's a great fit for them. If you're buying a business in general, obviously, you want to make sure that everything's a good fit and everyone's a good fit right out of the gate. Obviously, there's some times that you have to make changes, but most of the time it's they'll make sure that they've met everyone in the group to make sure it's a good fit.
No, that's great.
I don't know if that answers your question very good,
but I thought it was an excellent answer. Okay. That was really good. I think from my experience, that's one of the things we try to really get people to pay attention to early on is how is the relationship going to change? Because if they've already been working there and they've already been an employee and now they're going to be a co-owner, what are the things that are going to be different? And if you've got certain expectations, kind of back to the tax conversation, if you've got in particular any specific financial expectations, and you're going to be executing a new employment agreement or some other kind of agreement covering that kind of core compensation, what is that going to look like and how is that going to change so that you understand, how the dollars are going to flow and then also how they can legally, how that can be changed. Is that something where there's a policy that's, subject to somebody else's sign off that, could change, and do you understand how that's going to work?
Yeah, there certainly have been some buyers that I've worked with that, just wanted analysis on the practice before they even wanted to talk numbers, because if it can't support both of you, and maybe you're leaving an associate position and you have this idea in your mind that you need to make this certain amount, what benefits are included in that. And then you sit down and look at the numbers of what you're actually going to be taking away by paying, maybe the doctor that's wanting to stay on for 3 to 5 years. Sometimes there's issues with that. We've looked at several of those and they've chose to go elsewhere. But that's just part of it.
Yeah.
Well, and kind of on that note, we've been talking about this in this entire podcast, but what's the best advice to help buyers have a successful deal? You talked about relationships, you talked about kind of having the life insurance in place. Like, what are the best advice you could offer to a dentist or anybody in the medical field that's looking to buy? What would be some advice you would provide them, both for Jennifer and CJ?
For me, I would say the best that you can, try to remove the emotion out of it. Remove your emotion out of, what you have in your head. Rely on the data, the facts, not what you feel like you should make, what you feel like, someone else should make. Really, truly dig into, and it's not just because I'm a numbers person, but really, that's where the data is. That's what actually tells the story of, can you support 2 providers or 3 providers, depending on the size of the practice, and really just understanding, what that split is. If you're going to buy somebody out, but the seller's going to stay on for a few years, how is the shift? The front desk, how are they going to schedule your patients? Who gets, unfortunately, those leftovers? Who gets the low-hanging fruit that is maybe not as exciting to do, but also maybe doesn't pay as much? And so what does that look like? Because there's going to be a shift in your culture. And so just getting all of that out on the table immediately and kind of having a written plan.
Yeah, that's all great things for sure. That's not a whole lot to add to that, but I would say on the relationship side, your teammates, your attorney, your CPA, your banker, whoever you have involved, make sure that they're talking. Things go much smoother when everyone's on the same page with your own team, and identifying those items that need to be taken care of, maybe in a more timely manner than waiting till the end. But also, making sure if there's going to be a partner involved, making sure that everything is well thought out, not just having the attorneys talk to each other, but if you're working together from closing day on, you want to make sure that everyone is happy. All partners involved are happy with the way things closed and are moving forward. So
great advice. Great advice. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. And please continue to stay tuned for more riveting content. We'll be back again with CJ and Jennifer on future episodes in this series as we're talking about healthcare transactions. Thank you all and have a great day. Thank you for joining us today. For future episodes, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And please check out our website at www.goforemanlaw.com/learning.